Welcome you to the first official meeting of the House Oversight Committee. However, before we begin our official business and I state my opening statement about the purpose and the core of this committee during the next 2 years, we have some veterans on this committee and we have some new faces. So I'd like to begin in the front with Representative Arthur Handy and just let him reintroduce himself, where he's from, what district he represents. So welcome, Representative Handy. I'm happy to have you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Serpa. I'm Arthur Handy from Cranston. I've been around for a little while. I'm also the chair of the Environment and Natural Resources Committee, and it's my third year, I believe, on oversight. So I'm looking forward to another opportunity to help us move a lot of things forward. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you, Rep. Handy. Rep. Chippendale.
I am Michael Chippendale from District 40, Foster, Gloucester, and Coventry, and I am enjoying my 5th year on oversight.
Go ahead, Rep.
Rep. McKiernan from District 7, which is in Providence, and this will be my 3rd year, beginning my 3rd year on oversight.
Thank you. And to my left, we have a freshman, but welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is Jason Knight. Am I on? Now I'm on.
Now you're on.
All right. See, mastered the button first. My name is Jason Knight. I'm representative from District 67, covering parts of Barrington and Warren. And I'm a freshman, like I said, and I'm very pleased to be here and excited for the opportunity.
Thank you, Jason. Rep. Tansey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Teresa Tansey. I'm in my 7th year at the State House, and I represent Narragansett and South Kingstown. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to serve on the Oversight Committee. Thank you.
I'm happy to have you, Rep. Tansey. Rep. Solomon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Joe Solomon from District 22 in Warwick. This is my 3rd year as a legislator, and I'm very much looking forward to being a part of the Oversight Committee.
Thank you, Representative. And to my far right, Rep. Winfield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tommy Winfield, District 53, encompasses Smithfield and parts of Gloucester. I'm ranking fossil with my seatmate. We're starting our 25th year.
A silver anniversary. We'll have to have a cake. Rep. Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Anastasia Williams. I'm State Representative of District Number 9 in the City of Providence, and I am delighted to be on the Oversight Committee because, as you see, it takes a woman to do the job right. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Williams. And to my immediate right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ray Johnson, I represent District 61 in the City of Pawtucket. This is my 7th year in the General Assembly and beginning my 3rd year in oversight. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you, and hopefully we have a productive session.
Thank you, and welcome to all of you. I am blessed with an outstanding, excellent committee who bring many talents and much insight to this committee. And by the way, I'm Representative Patricia Serpa. I represent mostly West Warwick, a little part of Warwick, and a little part of Coventry. This is my 11th year as a state legislator. Before we begin tonight, I want to set the tone for this meeting and for a new direction for the House Oversight Committee. I have said for a very long time that it's been an underutilized committee, and I intend to turn that ship around. And these remarks are from the bottom of my heart and the result of my own experiences on the campaign trail. And we all heard loudly and clearly that our citizens want something different. They said it at the national level, and when I went door to door, I heard it at the state level. We have a very frustrated electorate out there. They are not happy with business as usual. So my focus during the next 2 years will be to make sure that business as usual is no longer the song of the day. I'm going to shake things up a little bit. And contentious elections are sometimes good. They shake us all up, and they make us change. Change is hard, but change is good. We have some discontented constituents who let us know when we go door to door about all the things in state government that aren't working. Every 2 years, we go to the doors and they let us know what they're not happy about. And after this particularly contentious election, I began to feel like we are the firewall between you, and when I say you, I mean collectively, you and state government, because you're in your offices and you mostly don't hear what we hear about state government. Taxpayers feel that they pay good money for an effective state government, and yet, by and large, there are many offices, unfortunately, that deliver poor customer service. And that has to change. And it has to change sooner rather than later. So if some of these hearings make some of the administrators uncomfortable, I'm not even going to apologize for that. Because we're very uncomfortable when we get the angry phone calls from our constituents who can't get through to your offices. When I say your offices, I mean collectively. When they're put on hold for 4 hours, or they're put on hold for 2 hours, or they do get through to someone's voicemail and nobody calls them back, they can't get through to you again. So guess who they call and vent to? All of us. So we go door to door, and we hear about everything that's wrong with government, from local government. The streetlight's not fixed, my garbage doesn't get picked up in a timely manner, the trash men leave it all over the road. And I think for most of us, I'll speak mostly for myself, my municipal people respond pretty well. I can pick up the phone, it gets done, the trash gets picked up. But sometimes, unfortunately, all too often, we have to intervene through our Office of Constituent Services to resolve problems for many of our constituents. That should not be. And you all saw the UHIP rollout, and we responded immediately. That was launched in September against the advice of everyone. We knew immediately that that rollout was in a free fall. We responded immediately, October, November, December. There was a lot of tension there, and it's still not fixed. And that was the first time in my experience here, and I'll defer to my colleagues to my right who have been here longer than I. From what I hear, that was the first time there were joint hearings between finance and oversight. And I have always said that oversight should be the right hand of finance. And that's what I intend to make this committee. I'm going to turn this ship around, and we will be the right hand of finance. So where I find waste, a lack of accountability, and a lack of efficiency, please be assured that I will be reporting it and cooperating with finance. The governor and the speaker and the Senate president have all verbalized some of their own priorities this year. So if I detect that we're not using our resources wisely in our state government offices, I will not be shy about reporting it. So please don't misinterpret my calm, measured remarks tonight as indifference, because it is not indifference. If we have to get more aggressive in this committee to get state government to respond, I assure you that I am not shy about doing that. Because my time in the legislature, much of the constituent response is negative towards all of you. And when I say you, again, directors, I mean collectively about state government. And that is going to change for as long as I hold this seat. I promise you that. And what concerns me tonight is the late tax returns. This cannot be the new normal in Rhode Island. And I'll let my colleagues speak for themselves, but when I went door to door, well, let me back up. In April, when I first got this assignment, and I had the Division of Taxation here, you were almost sure that you would have the problem fixed by July. I'm knocking on doors in July, and I'm hearing, gee, Pat, I don't have my income tax return yet. We're going on vacation in August. I could have used that money for spending money in August. Then I read in the media that the July deadline wasn't met. You'd have it resolved by November. Well, I'm still campaigning in September and October, and people are still waiting for their money. They missed the money for their August vacations. They missed the money for their back-to-school clothes for their kids or for a new tablet. And as recently as the week before Christmas, I got an email, an angry email from a constituent venting at me because she had to put some gifts on charge cards that she would have liked the cash from her income tax return. So they're still outstanding, and as I said, this has to not become the new normal, that Rhode Islanders are waiting a year and a half, 2 years, and not getting their income tax forms. And sometimes I would ask them, well, how long have you been waiting? 6 months, 8 months. Did you hear from the Division of Taxation? No, I haven't heard a thing. I can't get through. So that's the first topic on our agenda tonight, and I assure you, directors, that we're very serious about this. You just happen to be our first customers tonight. And again, I'm going to be respectful. I will defer to your expertise. I'm going to leave it to you to figure out the problems. We are not managers, and due to separation of powers, we are not managers. We can't tell you how to do your jobs, but we can tell you that there's a large proportion of the electorate out there that is not happy with the way you're doing your jobs. So we are going to expect something different from you. So, that being said, Representative Kiernan, go right ahead.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I would like to add to that, and this is more or less based on the UHIP hearings. It's got nothing to do with the folks who are here tonight, but we're expecting something new. Straight talk would be very much appreciated. We got a lot of runaround talk, and it makes our jobs in terms of oversight much more difficult. So straight talk would be very much appreciated, because if there's a problem, there's a problem. If there's delays, there's delays. We do appreciate. I remember the last hearing that you folks came to, so I'm adding that. That's my own addition to the chairwoman's point. We don't want runaround for the next 2 years. Or at least I don't. Thank you.
And Rep. McCannon, I will tell you, and again, this is no reflection on you. During those UHIP hearings, when we knew that system was in free fall, I'm not convinced that the numbers we were being given were entirely accurate. So, in addition to accurate reporting, from UHIP, and going forward, I'm going to give the acting director there, some time that the governor has allotted him, but he will be coming back to us with some more reporting, and I'm going to insist upon accuracy and honesty. And if I detect anything but, then I will take the next step, whatever that may be. So, that being said, before I call the two directors to the table, are there any members who would like to add anything or say anything, or do you want to wait for questions? Okay, so Directors Savage and Hull, please join us. And Director Savage, do I owe you congratulations or sympathies, first of all? Did I read a small piece in the paper that you are now officially the director?
Yes.
Okay.
Is it on?
Yes, we can hear you. Button up.
Yes. After that introduction, I don't know if it's a congratulations, but I want to stress that thank you. I'm excited and for the opportunity to tell our story. I think it's a compelling one, and things have changed, and things are changing. So I'll let Director Hull start, and then we can go.
Thanks, Nina. Thank you, Chairwoman Serpa, and thank you for the rest of the Oversight Committee. In response to your request, Nina and I, your newly appointed tax administrator, and myself, who've been here sort of a collective 11 months for me and 13 months for Nina. So plus or minus a year, I arrived sort of February, March of last year after tax season was sort of into swing here, and we have done our best to drive change. So, straight talk is what you want, and change, I assure you, these are things that Nina and I are all about, and I think you'll hear about that tonight. And we will clearly articulate in numbers that you'll see, and we put a lot of data together here for tonight. We'll clearly articulate when things are estimates or based on estimates and when they are hard numbers, okay? So a couple things. We're going to talk tonight for a little bit about the evolution of the tax function, where it is now, when Nina and I picked it up, plus or minus a year ago. We're going to talk then about the status of refunds and the tactics Nina and our collective team have taken to kind of get things to the next stage and get to a better place. And then we're going to talk for a brief moment, because I think Chairwoman Serpa has asked us to talk a little about the status of retail sales permits, and we'll talk about that at the back end.
That last, though, if you don't mind.
It's last
okay.
in the presentation.
Yes.
You can do what you want with it. It's the last couple slides. So our focus has been, Nina and mine, one of, kind of a very dynamic tax environment. We're going to talk about that. It is different than anything anyone's seen, I think, in the last 30 or 40 years. You can ask some of the tax professionals behind us who have sort of a collective 40 or 50 years worth of service between them. We are dealing with the same frustrations you are. So is the federal government. So are the rest of the states in the union. We have introduced what I would tell you is a very data-focused approach to everything. I've spent almost 30 years in the private sector as a public company CFO. I only want data. So we dig for data when we can have it. When we don't, we send analysis people in to try and kind of pull it together as possible. We're trying to drive technological change, at the same time handle record numbers of everything. And we're going to talk to you about that a little bit more. So over the last year or so, here's a little lift on where we are and what we've been through. 7 quick things. We have completed the three of 4 phases of our new STARS technology. It is largely it is on time and on budget. The last phase is really largely portal and internet tools.
Would you mind putting it on the slide too? I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you hit the little that icon, hit that.
I can't see my thing over here.
Yep, hit it. Nope. The one next to it. That one. There you go. So we're a slide or two too far ahead. So page other direction. There you go. Okay. Said we were technologically focused. Maybe that I spoke too soon. So the STAR system is in and up and running. We have navigated that. It is, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But on time, on budget. The last piece of this is online functionality. So everything ticks and ties. We are in a good place. We have linked or integrated all the technology and tax returns. We're handling roughly 58 different tax types, everything from cigarettes to alcohol to sales tax, personal tax, corporate tax. We could do this all day. It is a busy, complicated calculus. All those are now integrated. In another day, each one was separate. Now all these returns, if you have an EIN or a social security number or you're in any one filing, it has to be connected. One person in one part of the taxation team can't simply enter something standalone. It has to force tie. That takes more time, but the good news is it's working. And we won't have the errors we had in the past, but a big adjustment for the 231 people in taxation. Real-time response to everything. Information is now shared and feeds with the IRS, with federal authorities, a more complex calculus for sure. We've replaced manual entry up front with state-of-the-art optical character recognition. Really hard. Force-feeding data into a computer system that you'd have had an army of people keying it in before. Very different. One of the defining changes of that is you can't fix it as you see it or pass over something because you don't think it's meaningful. The system's going to kick it out. That created some of the slowness last year. We've had a ton of experiential learning. Talk to you about that's. We think in this next round that will not be the problem it once was. But learning challenges. 100% audit review. Our general auditor took us to a point way different than prior years. While Nina and I were neophytes in this process in the first quarter of last calendar year, every single tax return above a minimum number was being reviewed. That was never the way it was done in prior year. That's probably 3 times what was looked at in prior years. So we weren't ready probably for that task, but we were both new in the job. The outgoing tax administrator was somewhere else, and we dealt with the problem. Having said that, I think we've adjusted to that. We've reduced our outstanding refund base to what we think is a steady state level, and with all due respect, Chairwoman Serpa, we think we're at the right number, and we'll talk about that in great length for you. So you can decide with us whether you think that's right or wrong, but that's what we think, and we'll come back to that. We've rolled out a communications model with transparency at the core. tried to make both directions of communication, both outward from our team and the way that comes into us, uniform scripts, dial up the technology a little bit, see if we can't shorten times to get to somebody, and so forth. So those are all part of our kind of look forward to 2017. Key measures. Quickly, in 2016, we handled 2.5 million filings for the state of Rhode Island. In so doing, across 231 employees, the vast majority of whom work in Council 94, we've got Lynn Loveday and Crystal Cody behind us, who represent the entire team. These people work nights and weekends. This is a hardworking team of your fellow citizens in Rhode Island who are pushing forward to make this happen. They have worked some extraordinary hours to get to where we are, and we're greatly appreciative. And Nina will talk more about that later. 58 different tax streams, 98% of them are completely interwoven or integrated. $3.26 billion in annual tax revenue gathered by these 231 people. Seems like a big number to me. $1.24 billion in personal income tax, the single largest component of our revenue stream. On the personal income tax side specifically, we processed 645,000 tax returns, 456,000 were refunds. Almost 280 million refunds paid. That is an historical high. It's 12% higher than anything we've ever paid out in history in the state of Rhode Island. Today, at the beginning of the year, 4,300 remaining refunds. And we'll talk about exactly what's in those refunds and why we think that's the right number. 1.9 million in fraud prevented, up nearly 25% from prior year. Nina?
Thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman Sherpa and honorable committee members, for allowing me the opportunity to present today. I will talk about all of the things we've done to fix the problems that you all face day to day coming up. I wanted to provide you a context, generally numerically with data, to show you what the taxation context is. But I would be remiss if I didn't talk about, and we understand the balance that we have. We have a very committed duty to serve the taxpayers. But I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the need to balance that duty with protecting the public interest and the interest of the taxpayers. As you'll see, as you know, there are cybersecurity criminals out there whose mission it is to take our taxpayers' money. It is happening nationwide. We, at the state level, the Federation of Tax Administrators, are teaming up with the IRS to protect taxpayers, their identities. We've had situations in Rhode Island, a Rhode Island company last year with upwards of 200 employees. They faced a phishing incident whereby someone pretending to be their payroll company called their payroll director or HR director and said, give me all of your payroll information. I need it for X, Y, and Z. And they sent it. And they called me in a panic and said, what do? We just sent over all our employee records. Well, we had to stop those refunds, match up the Social Security numbers, and do what we do when we get that information. We're getting that information daily from the IRS and from other states. And many of the cyber criminals who steal the data of taxpayers, they don't commit the crimes they don't steal Rhode Island data and file the returns in Rhode Island. They go to other states. And likewise, if there are compromised identities in other states, they don't file it in those states. They file it here. There's also a darknet economy that trades stolen identity information. This is a real threat. This is something that we're balancing. So I want to stress that the IRS estimates that 2016 fraud was up almost 50% from 2014. There are emerging concerns about best practices, and it's resulted in delays. I know that you don't want to hear that. I know you're your constituents don't want to hear it. But we would be remiss if we didn't tell you that other states are, one, not talking about their delays. They're not even giving a time frame. The IRS has said with regard to certain types of returns, child credit, earned income tax credit, that they will not even process those returns until February 15th, 2015. We have increased our refundable earned income tax credit. Those returns happen to be rife with fraud at times, and we owe it to you to do our job and look at those returns more quickly. There were $1.9 million was prevented in fraud this year. We have approximately 1,000 more returns flagged than last year for fraud. That's confirmed fraud. We're still in the process of reviewing. That's 23% more dollars than last year. We have had representatives call us and say, I had my identity stolen. And among your membership, we've also had taxpayers call us and say, where's my refund? And we found out a refund had been issued. So these are real concerns that we deal with, and I think there has to be a new narrative. I'm not saying that doesn't have to be change. I absolutely agree with you that we have to change what we do and how we do it, and help taxpayers and help you face some of the issues that you face day to day. I will tell you, as we get into our communication strategy, that we want to partner with you in that regard. So just to give you some more context about taxation and what we do, you'll see on this slide the blue bars are year over year, the number of refunds, and the red bar is the dollar amount. And it goes to Director Hull's point that taxation is at a record-setting point in its history. We've put back almost $280 million into the pockets of Rhode Islanders, and we've issued about 3,000 more refunds than we did last year. We'll explain more. Given the timeframes in our system implementation, you'll see that we're right at where we need to be. Taxpayer behavior with regard to the number of returns, we have roughly the same amount. We'll show you that data as well. The average amount per taxpayer has gone up almost by $50 or so, or 11% compared to last year. This slide I wanted to give you this slide because you had asked for our organizational chart, and I wanted to show the challenges that our team has faced of 231 FTEs. And by the way, that number has gone up since 2013. But you'll see that our revenue collections are at historic highs. We're at almost $3.2 billion, a little over $3.1 billion collected last year. And that's while doing a system implementation where our staff have had to do double duty, do their day job, plus learn a brand new system, get trained on it, test it, and do the job, and they've done a great job. I also want to echo what Director Hull has said about our relationship with the union. Lynn Loveday is here. Crystal Cody is here. They're from Council 94. Kevin Nelson, who's president of our supervisors union, has worked with us, and we have a fantastic relationship. Last year, on weekly, we were moving people, and I'll get into those details, but I want to thank them. It's those employees that deserve the credit for this what I consider relative success given the circumstances.
So on this slide, this kind of gets to what we're talking about. What's remaining on refunds? So 4 points. First, 4,316 refunds left at this point in time. That's less than 1% of the total amount issued. Many of those refunds have come in the last, kind of 2 or 3 months at the earliest. Two, the vast majority of that base, we think roughly 74 to 75% are refunds that are incomplete, with errors, transposed Social Security numbers, or are awaiting response from our taxpayers. We've sent messages out to over 1,000 of them and waiting on a response. So when I see that number, and by the way, look at the number in the first column where we were before we did our technology implementation, almost 6,000. So, and what happened last year in 2015, the year before this tax year, before we put $1 of technology into process, we had to clear virtually everything out to get to kind of a new base of low. So we think that given what we're sitting on in terms of risk and other attributes, this is a good number. I don't know, I won't define a new normal because I'm not smart enough to do that. But what I can tell you is that I feel comfortable that 4,300 remaining refunds, subject to the kind of analysis we've done and our estimates that build up to that remaining amount, is a good number for us. That I think the team who got to that has done a good play. Would we have liked it exactly to Chairwoman Serpa's point? Would we have liked that number to have gotten there in June or July? Definitely. But we had both Nina and I had a lot of learning to do. We had a new technology to do. We had a workforce that had to kind of morph and change to a completely different kind of way of doing their jobs. And we've got a long way on that last part, but they've really pushed at it, and we're coming along.
Director, can I stop you right there? And I don't mean to break your cadence,
Nope.
but I think Rep. Tansey had a question. And would you want to ask it now, or Representative?
It was mine,
I'm
Madam
sorry. Go
Chairwoman.
ahead. All right, go ahead.
I'm up. Can you hear me?
Sure.
What is it? So please educate me. What does it mean to have a return that's awaiting a customer response? Is that like a?
So it's just what you think, right? So we triage all the returns. Some are refunds, some they owe us money, right? But we triage all of them, and those that require further information or completion, we reach out either through email or other means to whatever's reported on their forms that gives us the access point. We reach out to those taxpayers and say, please call the Department of Revenue, Department of Taxation. We have some questions about your return. And then we wait. And there's no other way you'd approach that. So there's a big number sitting out with them waiting for response. Go ahead, Nina.
So 1,128 letters were sent, or emails were sent to taxpayers, and of that 4,300, which is an estimate, we are waiting for 1,128 taxpayers to get back to us.
And just one other question. I'm curious. So there's a number here of outstanding returns, which you've identified in the last bar, 4316.
Right.
As a percentage of the total return or the total refunds that you have to do this year, what does that number represent? And the second part of my question is
less than 1%.
Less than 1%. Yep. What's do you happen to know what the federal IRS equivalent number is?
Well,
where did they float at in terms of outstanding refunds?
I will tell you that Rhode Island is an outlier in that regard, and that we're discussing it. No other state, nor the IRS anywhere has this level of transparency. No one does it. No one reports what they don't have, how long it's going to take. We felt that we did it last year because we owed it to you. We owed it to the taxpayers to show you exactly what we were going through. We were here in June. We gave you a similar deck about what was happening. We reported at revenue estimating, but no one else is giving this level of data. And it just isn't done.
Okay, thank you.
It's a fair question.
So in other words, your transparency
right.
is you're exhibiting transparency that other people aren't. So we don't know what the federal number is or any other state.
No.
We do not.
And last question on the of the 1128 that you have out there, send an email. That's fantastic. Do you have a team that's been working on perhaps trying to contact these taxpayers in different fashion?
So the nature of how taxation works is these processes are messy. When a form comes in, it's not a return unless it's complete and accurate. We'll put it in the system, and in prior days, paper would come in, data processing would enter what they could, and it would go into different queues. Now that information is being scanned, and there are sometimes errors. There are math errors. There's Social Security number inversed. I saw a return last year with nothing filled in, just signed, that people think, or people may think they filed a federal return, and because they filed a federal return, they're automatically entitled to a state return. So, a refund rather. There's always a batch of returns that people don't pay attention, and it's less than 1% right now, but they will not respond. And states across the country there's never a time when all of them are done. So year over year, there are taxpayers who simply don't respond or don't follow up, or they just don't. And that's the nature of the business of tax.
So just one thing I might add to Nina's point, which is on response, and we talked a lot about two-way communication, and you're asking the right question, I think, which is how does that work, and how do we talk to them, and how do they talk to us? Look, we were overwhelmed last year. We had a lot of moving parts. Nina and I were two of them. We were moving, new to the process, but also new technology, new demands, new risk environment. When we communicate with our taxpayers, we want to make sure that they have all the right data, that they get paid out in time. This number, 4,300, these are returns coming in now. These aren't returns that have been sitting there. And what anecdotally, here's what we get, and we respond to every single one. There's no doubt. When Nina gets called, when I get called, when Nina's team behind you, Mike Knoll and others who are behind us here today get called, everyone gets triaged. But here's the thing. First, when they call, the vast majority in the back end of the cycle who are calling, their deposit's already made and they haven't checked. Their name doesn't exist anywhere. They've filed 2 returns. These are anecdotes that I give you, not because I'm trying to get out of the way of doing it, but every time we research it, we go, oh my goodness, here's another one that there's nothing we can do on this. This person's been called, or they're in the middle of a dispute and they just don't like the outcome, right? So, but here's what frames it that makes it even harder. There is legislation on the books, and we'll pull it up later, and it's in the back end of our slides in the appendix, which basically frames, surprising to me, coming from the private sector, Nina and I cannot say anything about any taxpayer, corporate or individual, to anybody outside the tax team, not to my boss, the governor, not to anyone outside our space about specifics of any taxpayer, unless they give a power of attorney to an asker, like yourself or Chairwoman Serpa or the Speaker or anyone. If they give them that, then we can talk to it. So what happens is, and by the way, the punishment for that is a year in jail for either Nina or myself, and neither of us are looking forward to that. So, and we'll show you the legislation. And by the way, you should evaluate it and decide whether you think it's appropriate. Oddly enough, after being here for a year, we think it's probably the right thing, because it prevents sort of people getting into other people's tax returns. Even those of you who are trying to do a good deed and protect people, what we have found is that we'll get that call, and we get a lot of them. I can't find it where it is. We'll do the immediate homework. We'll go, oh my gosh, it's in your account. And then it'll be over. The news media who picked it up or whoever picked it up is done with it, and they'll call us back, and they'll call us back looking for closure. I can't tell you. It's an extraordinary one-way street. It does protect every taxpayer in Rhode Island, and so it's for good reason, but it's a bizarre twist. And we'll take you through the legislation if you want to know it. And Nina, would you add anything to that?
I would, and I think it's important to keep in mind that the foundation of our tax compliance system is based on voluntary compliance. There, we rely on taxpayers to know that their financial information is protected. That's why they give us so much personal information. So it really is the foundation of what we do, confidentiality. And I will not, and I've gotten angry phone calls from members of the legislature. I cannot tell you the details of why something happened, and it's for good reason. We are the revenue source for the state. We protect taxpayer information. We take it very seriously. We get audited by the IRS every year. There are federal penalties for not complying, and there are state penalties. So that is something I treasure and I honor, and it's a tremendous responsibility. So it is, but it doesn't help us to defend ourselves in certain situations.
I can't even tell you if a refund's been sent for one of your clients, or if it's already in the bank. And I started down that path when I first got here, and I was assaulted by our legal corps within the tax team that I was going to and put somebody in a bad situation. I will say we've lived with it. You should still bring these names to us. We will still handle them. We will do everything we can. That's our job. But if you don't get a lot of responses from us, you know it's not because we're hiding from you. Okay, Nina?
That's perfect.
Before you go any further, I think the questions are germane when as you're talking, because often as you go on and on, we forget what we wanted to ask. I think Rep. Carson had a question.
I have a quick question. You made reference to the fact that a taxpayer can give the power of attorney.
Sure can.
Who can they give that power of attorney to?
Anyone.
Thank you.
Best I know, right? Nina, you're a lawyer.
There might be certain circumstances, but there is a waiver of confidentiality form that you can that the taxpayer can sign, and we like it to be very specific.
Okay, so it's a power of attorney or a waiver?
The power of attorney is in administrative hearings. Neil, correct me if I'm wrong, in certain limited circumstances.
Yeah, 2848 would be for a CPA, attorney,
to represent the taxpayer in an administrative proceeding.
And that's which one is that?
That's the power of attorney.
Okay.
But if a taxpayer wants to send an email, I waive my confidentiality with regard to my 2015 tax year, and we can confirm that it's the taxpayer. Now, we have a screening process to make sure that the information we provide is to the actual taxpayer. So, yes,
thank you.
That would be possible.
Rep. Chippendale?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Directors Hull and Savage. Sort of piggybacking off of Rep. Knight's question, is that 1%, is that a static snapshot or is that a rolling queue?
What we've given you right there is a static picture at basically year end, Rep. Chippendale. So that's a great question. It's so dynamic. I mean, it changes every day.
Sure.
But that's kind of, as we close the year out, that's where we were standing.
So in anticipation of obviously what's breathing down your necks right now,
Exactly.
all of our necks, in fact.
The tsunami coming, right? Exactly.
How do you feel the department is situated to deal with that?
We're going to. That's
good tee up for
is that part of.
That's
Okay,
it's the right question. So.
Right. So then, before you get into that part of the presentation, my final question: certainly, it makes sense that an incomplete application would be put to the side for further review. Is there any? Have you all noticed any difference between electronic filers and paper filers? Has it been more problematic with paper versus electronic, or is there no correlation there?
It's much more difficult to process a paper return with an error. So one of the proactive things we're doing is we discovered a paper file with a mistake, a W-2 issue, W-3 issue. We changed the order of our forms. We're also going to be proactively reaching out to taxpayers when we see a mistake that will delay their processing. We'll send a letter right away rather than waiting for them to get the next in line in the queue. So that should alleviate some of the issues for people who finally get contacted by us and they're told, you have this mistake. We're going to do that on the front end rather than wait to get to their mistake in the queue of all returns. So that, we think, will have a significant benefit to your constituents. So we have taken action.
Thank you, Directors.
I believe Rep. McCannon had a question, then Rep. Handy, then Rep. Solomon.
Thank you. We were on slide 9, but I'm now going to bring us back to slide 6. And before that, I have a question specific to the slide, but I do want to generally comment that there's a new narrative and that the folks are working hard. I believe that with you folks. I personally believe that, having sat through the last explanation, and that there's a lot of fraud protection. There's a lot of other things that are happening. But the question that I have, and I'm going to ask you a question about the slide, but the question that I have that's relevant to the conversation we were just having, you can't communicate with us, but what kind of communication is happening with the citizens? So if they have a question, usually, and I've heard a few, but not too many, but generally speaking, I can't get through, they don't return my call. That's part of the complaint. So what are we doing on that end?
So I will tell you, as of November, we had answered all of our emails. Mid-November, emails were answered. Telephone calls weren't ringing about refunds. We send notices, payment notices. The phone calls are down to almost nothing on refunds, and that's a big telling point for us. We can be reached by email. We can be reached by telephone. We have walk-in. I have statistics later on, so you can see the number of taxpayers that we've served, and we do keep counts of emails, walk-ins, and telephone calls.
Do you keep count of the time that it would take?
The wait time?
Yeah. Or I mean, it's legit. If it takes 24 hours or 48, that's okay. But
at the peak season, it's slower. So the messaging we're getting out is file earlier, file electronically, and you will get your refund faster. What happened last year is everything happened all at once at the highest point in our volume. So we had to troubleshoot at the same time that the volume was hitting, and our staff was being trained for the first year on a new system. So it was real-time training on a new system, record high levels of returns and refunds, more complicated refunds and fraud.
But as we approach the new season, you're confident that if there's a phone call to be returned, it's going to happen much more quickly before it boils over and gets to the state rep level, as it were.
I would hope, yes.
Okay.
That is our hope. We've changed our phone system. We have more people on the phone. We're putting more staff on the phones. We're cross-training staff so that if we need to add more people, they can log in and they can get on the phones. The problem with personal income tax, though, is you can't just move people who don't have personal income tax experience. So I'll get into our staffing levels, what we're doing. We're pulling people from other sections and putting them on customer service. And we've done that last year. We'll continue to do that this year.
Just one point I'll add to that. So we have a couple pages on communication and
so at the end of
It's the right points, though, and you're right on it. I think one of the messages that we have to kind of acknowledge is that we have sort of 600,000 filers, and the challenge is that when you hit peak season, there's no amount of men and women you're going to put to have an immediate response, right? It's just mathematically you couldn't staff for it. When there's a change in your credit card, or you'll get that wait from private industry that has limitless sort of kind of funding and opportunity sets. I mean, you wait with them too, right? You can't always staff for the very biggest number. You have to kind of do the best you can. I think we put the processes in place, and you'll see the tactics that should make it a lot better. And that's what we hope, because we don't like you getting called. It's a nuisance to you. We can't kind of relate to you as quickly as we would with the kind of data that we'd like to give you.
Well, it also creates more phone calls for you.
It's rework all the way through. Yeah. And I just want to say, and then we'll move on to the next slide. Unless you have more questions.
Well, my question is, walk us through slide that's on page 6. That would be helpful to me. Walk me through, at least. I want to know what we're looking at here.
Okay.
It's on page 6.
Sure.
So the blue bars are, starting from the left, are the number of tax refunds that year. So in 2013, there were 474,734 refunds. And the dollar value of those refunds was $266 million. The next year, it was 470,000 refunds. Dollar value was $267 million. It was constant. The following year, in 2015, the refund numbers went down, and the number of refunds went down. Now, that was the year we were getting ready to implement our new system. We're doing a clean out. That may be attributable to that. The following year, this year, 456,894 refunds, $279 million.
And some of that is fraud detection and better efficiency.
Well,
we're collecting more on what I'll say generally a few less. It's 20,000 less returns than 13, and it's $13 million more.
Yes, that's right.
You got it exactly right.
So is that attributable to the new system in some part?
In some part, yes, I think so. And I think we're processing, we're paying out $280 million. So we're
okay. All right.
So it's not a collection. It's how much we're paying in refunds.
I got you.
So,
And you should know, what's hard about any of these statistics is that we change the tax code every year, right?
Okay.
So, for example, the earned income tax credit was something we goosed in the last tax cycle, and that meant, that we know that's one of the contributing factors to more dollars going back to the citizenry. And so
I'm gonna let you guys finish your thing, but I'm very interested in seeing this, or getting directed to the slides that show us the better collection. I'm interested on the revenue side.
yes,
from
absolutely.
the new system.
So these are, and we have that slide.
Okay,
All right.
I'm gonna let you. Thank you.
I'm going to let Rep. Solomon ask his questions before you proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In slide 4, you stated that $1.24 billion in personal income tax payments were collected. However, $1.9 million of fraud was prevented. Although the slide says that's a 23% increase over prior year, how does that compare to years prior to that, as well as other states?
Yes, okay.
it's lumpy. Some years were actually as high or higher than 1.9 if you go back enough. I'm not sure how good the data was in those early years with the other system, and I don't want to impugn it, but it was up obviously year over year. To your point, almost 25%. It was closer to $1 million last year.
Okay.
But the fact of the matter is, it's lumpy over the course of the year. So,
but generally speaking, it's by my math, it's less than 0.25% of the total personal income tax payments.
correct. That's right.
No, how does that compare to other states, though?
In terms of fraud percentages, I don't know.
In terms of fraud, I don't have that data with me, but the $1.24 billion are personal income tax payments. The fraud is, there is no relation to, the fraud is a separate statistic based on the filing of returns. Does that make sense? It's related to refunds. So in
regard to refunds,
right,
so it's not
right.
in regard to...
No, not in regard to entire,
okay.
just refund fraud.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Handy, I almost forgot you, then Representative Johnston.
And that's all right. And I don't necessarily, I think maybe you don't necessarily need to respond to it, but I think more, as we've been talking about sort of constituent relations, I think something that where you might not be able to give us information specific, at least possibly be able to at least let us know that you have communicated with that constituent. I would imagine that fits within the acceptable information piece. That might be a useful piece of information passed through.
We do that.
Oh, okay.
So we
And,
say we've responded or we've contacted the taxpayer.
And then, and I assume for everybody else here's education. Remember, too, one of the things I think, as you guys have said, by moving to electronic transfers and things like that, I think a huge number of people have just not realized they actually already got it because we're used to getting that paper check. So for all of our sakes, at least along the way. Thank you.
Well said.
You don't have to respond to it. I can we go to
Rep. Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As a follow-up to Rep. Solomon's point about the $1.2 million worth of fraud that's prevented, okay, so how many fraud cases did your agency actually detect? And a second part of that would be, what is the status of those fraud detections, if you can answer that?
So I do know last year there were about 1,300. This year there's about 1,700. Dollar amounts, we've gone up about 25%, 23% rather. And these are confirmed fraudulent. So the review process is ongoing, and there are, if we get a taxpayer who we suspect whose identity has been stolen, they do get a letter that we believe your identity has been stolen, please contact us. So that process takes time as well. So if they never contact us, then we don't process that return because more than likely it's fraud. But that's the number, and as the director said, it's lumpy. One year you could get 15 confirmed fraud returns that are millions of dollars. In other years, it's lots of little fraudulent returns for a smaller dollar amount. What I can tell you is we're up 23% in dollars this year over last year. So.
And I respect your due diligence because, and I appreciate your hard work your agency does to prevent and detect and prevent fraud and stuff like that. But what is the process that once you identify a fraudulent tax claim, if you can answer that, or how many actually has anybody been prosecuted for filing a fraudulent tax claim?
Well, there have been some prosecutions, federal prosecutions in the last year or so. You've probably read about them in the Journal.
How about state on the state level?
We are doing more. We have a special investigations unit that is looking more closely at that. I just don't feel comfortable or that it's right to talk about what we're doing on that end. So.
Okay, no, I was just looking for a number. I wasn't looking for. I get it. I know the process and how it goes and so forth and so on. But
right.
That'll be it. And I commend you guys for the work you and your agency does. Your union representatives, they represent a department that I'm sure works very, very hard and probably most of the time is well overwhelmed and so forth. But I do appreciate that the answers we're somewhat getting tonight. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? I know when you were here last year, you considered the possibility that maybe you had calibrated your fraud alerts or fraud detectors too sensitively. Do you not feel that way any longer? Do you feel you have it right then?
Yeah, I think we're still learning. There are aspects of that. Even as we go through it, we're using a lot of statistical analysis. We pulled in Paul Dion, who's sitting behind me, who's a economist and works for us in the OR to kind of do statistical analysis on where we can faster release things. So it's a great question. As to the specifics about how we tighten or close the gap, and the governor's asked us many of the same questions. Nina, I'll let you kind of address that a little bit.
We're looking at how I can't talk about fraud specifically. It's just not prudent. No other state does it. I would be remiss if I got into that dialogue with you in a public forum. I'd be happy to share more detailed information, but not in a public forum. I don't think it's prudent. We have looked at the way we do things and how the refunds and returns are going through our system and where they're landing and where the volume is and where we can put people to more quickly get consumer impact. So where we have low risk returns, we're putting those in a priority queue and saying, okay, we'll work on those. We can work on those faster. We'll put this many people on those. And we're doing that sort of agile flexibility with our staff, with the assistance of Paul Dion and others every day.
So for example, you can look at a group of refunds, and we can stratify them. And I don't want to get too far into the weeds on this, just for all the reasons Nina said, and exactly your question, exactly what we were learning a year ago, and go, the probability of risk on fraud on these is X or Y, and literally down to, if you have a confidence interval that it's 90% risk-free, maybe the expected loss would be $1,000 or $5,000. We can mass release those. But to give any more data on that would give the very recipe for end running us. So.
And I just wanted to ask you one other question, because I know throughout the UHIP hearings, which were mostly not pretty, many of us who served on both finance and oversight, we were contacted by employees who did not have the sense that they were well trained or adequately trained, and were being basically put in front of a computer. Okay, today you do this. So you get a sense that your employees feel that they're adequately trained, well trained to maintain that flexibility. Would your employees agree with that?
We have Lynn Loveday here and Crystal Cody for exactly that reason. It's a team. They have been trained. We work on this. It's our problem. I can't tell you enough how much credit goes to the rank and file at the Division of Taxation. We have moved them. We have asked of them to move to processing, move to personal income tax, help out with this, and they have done it at every turn. Now, these are all largely about 210 union members, and it's a large staff, and it is a great workforce. I'm honored and privileged to lead them, and I can't say enough about the union and their level of cooperation.
Well, that I'm sure that makes me, Rep. Tansey, and Rep. McKiernan, who else is on the committee, and Rep. Chippendale feel much better, because during the other hearings, I know we were all in communication with employees of those other offices and offices OFFICES, and they were told to not show their faces and not come to testify. They felt so ill-prepared that they feared for their jobs. So I'm glad that that's not happening in that office, and then I guess that credit goes to you as managers, as well as the flexibility of your staff willing and able to be cross-trained. So that makes me feel better.
It's a great question, and I take no credit. That's Nina and her leadership team. But I would urge you to ask Lynn, who represents that group, and Crystal. I would say, we have an open door. Nina talks to her team. Look, 231 people working around the clock. You do get complaints. They're in her office. So I don't think it's. And again, this is a slightly, I think a little different. This isn't a massive business transformation. We're not firing anybody. We're not rearranging the deck chairs. We are approaching this differently. And now that we have a new technology, now we have to start to adjust who does what, but we didn't do it beforehand. We had to learn with them. So, well,
even though they don't have to utter a word, their presence here speaks volumes, whereas at our other hearings, they just stayed away and contacted a number of us privately or offline out of fear of retribution. So your presence speaks volumes. And if you want to talk later, you certainly may, but I would like to get through these slides. Unless anybody else has a question immediately? No? Okay.
I think we're on slide 10, is where I think we left off. And some of these points have been made through your question and answer. So these are our fixes. This is what we're doing to fix the problems. And what we've done as Director Hull is we've revised our strategy to accelerate payment and manage expectations in the fraud environment. We're staffing, review, and upgrading constantly. We're adjusting our fraud analytics. We're introducing core software and scanning technology refinements. We have a great relationship with our STARS vendor, RSI, and they've been responsive to our needs as we need refinements. We have proactively partnered with our vendors and third-party software vendors, TurboTax and others, to reduce data importation errors. We've improved our 2D and barcode scanning processes and our review of those processes. And as Director Hull said, we're still learning. There are some things, this is 1 year out from a new system implementation, and we will be reviewing this tax season every week. We are going to be seeing the volume, what's happening, how are our phone calls, how are our walk-ins. On slide 10, additional lessons learned. We're trying to eliminate taxpayer errors through our tax form enhancements. We've been out in the community, in the tax preparer community, at least half a dozen times already. We're educating our preparers. We're encouraging, as we've done in this hearing, electronic filing. It's faster, it's better, and online credit card payments. That will improve some of the backlog and some of the issues we faced. As Director Hull said, we're also engaging in statistical analysis of our queues, and we're working on that. So many of you asked about our communication strategy, which is slide 11 or 12. We believe in transparency. We are the only state, I believe, right now that's engaging in this level of detail about what is happening in the tax context. And we owe it to be transparent. What this is showing, we have improved our online Where's My Refund online service. We will have a weekly dashboard that will show you exactly where we are compared to last year, and you won't have to ask for it. It will be public. It will be on our website. We have changed our phone lines. We have a uniform script, and we're working with our stakeholders and our vendors. The bottom right circle, some of you have asked, what was our volume last year? So our phone calls were 47,320. Walk-in assistance was 21,983, and emails 12,165. Those were actual constituents that were assisted. Part of our communication strategy is really, and we need your help with this, we cannot do it ourselves. We're asking all of our stakeholders, preparers, members of the legislature, and the governor's office. We need to manage communication to match the IRS. The IRS is already saying they expect to experience fraud and delays. They're not issuing certain refunds, as I said previously, until mid-February. What we can tell you today is refunds filed by March 31st will be paid more quickly, and you should tell your constituents that. Refunds filed electronically are better than paper filed. And all of this assumes that the filings are complete and accurate and the external fraud environment remains unchanged, or there isn't a major breach that we have to respond to. Additionally, highly complex multi-jurisdictional returns may take longer. Some of the other things we're doing to fix the problems that we faced last season, we have a dedicated lean trainer. We had 2 lean processes, which we go through every touch that we touch on a tax return, and we say, okay, how can we do that better? We did that in our tax processing section, and we did that in our collection section as well. So we're analyzing, improving, and streamlining our processes. We're enhancing staff in tax processing. We have an additional supervisor, and in personal income tax, we're adding 3 full-time additional employees. This gets to your question of, will you have more people on the phones? Yes. We're going to have 2 taxpayer specialists and 1 additional revenue agent in that section. We're adding additional seasonal staff in tax processing, approximately 10 more temporary. We're also evaluating, and we will be ready to go to second shift if we need to. That's a plan B. If we're doing our weekly and daily analysis, if we see the volume going up, we will do and the cross-training, we will do what needs to be done. So we're prepared. These are the things we've done to fix the problems, and I turn it over to Director Hull. Oh, never mind.
You're still on deck. I'm happy to talk about this. Go on.
No, this is our organizational chart that you asked for. What I can tell you is we have, since last tax season, moved people around. Our biggest sections are compliance and collection, processing, and field audit. And what we did last tax season is we took our field audit and our compliance and collections team, where we had revenue officers and revenue agents who could work who had the skill set to work on processing and personal income tax, we moved them. And we took them off the road. And what I will tell you is many of those positions are revenue enhancing positions. That is, they were funded to produce revenue, and our revenue still went up, even despite, because of the teamwork concept that is so instilled in taxation. People pick up the slack for others who help others. So we were moving around people from our org charts to get the job done. We did that last year. We'll continue to do that this year.
Can I ask you another question, too? And it's just a real quick one because I'm so stuck in the UHIP hearings. Who made the decision to purchase the STARS software that you're using?
That was in collaboration with the General Assembly. It was the prior tax administrator, David Sullivan, and the General Assembly. I commend the General Assembly and I commend David Sullivan for their vision because of our changing world. I think where I've been lucky that and some people would say I'm not so lucky, but I consider myself lucky that the project's almost over. It's on time, it's on budget, and all I have to do is work with the team to make sure it's working properly. So the hard, heavy lifting of funding and doing the programming and the testing the testing and the training has happened the last 2 years, but the work before that was done by my predecessor.
Rep. Chippendale, go ahead.
Thank you. On the prior slide, we saw that you're initiating lean principles. It said completed in 2016. It's ongoing, I suspect. Okay. So when implementing lean principles, we realize efficiencies that we didn't before if we're doing it right. So with those efficiencies, you could potentially see a lack of or a lesser need for FTEs. Are your plans rather to put them into those areas that I think you use the term revenue enhancing. Right. So they'll be maybe reallocated for fraud detection and things of that nature?
So we're a unionized shop. The bargaining agreement, the collective bargaining agreement says that union members can work down, but they can't work up. We have been lucky that a lot of revenue agents and revenue officers have been willing to pitch in to essentially work down. I don't see, as we are going to recalibrate our staff, and our hope is through all of these efficiencies, more revenue will be processed faster, and we'll be able to do more enforcement, more auditing, and there will be some efficiencies. I think those efficiencies are several years out as we get smarter to the system and really do some major organizational change management. Change has to happen. It's happening at the Division of Taxation, but it's not easy. We have a workforce that's moving from a very different environment. They've stepped up to the challenge, and they're doing it. And they're doing it under circumstances where taxpayers are yelling at them and mad, and it's not an easy job, but they're doing it. And they're so I don't know that we're there yet. To answer your question.
Thank you.
It's a great question, though, in the sense that, certainly, in the private sector, when you roll out a technology and you change things, you're expected to squeeze productivity out of it. I think the challenges here, I think, as Nina has alleged, are a little more complex, right? You have a workforce that there are more constraints on it, but they're working through it. And the good news is that Nina's partnership with them actually has yielded more than I would have imagined. They're really willing to try and do new things. We are trying to trade and do things. If you flick to the next slide, Nina, I'll lead on this one. You can jump in on this. I think cop sprayer. So the next slide, I think, gives you a little feeling, for Rep. Chippendale, for where the staffing has gone over a 14-year window. This is sort of the amount of data we had, so we thought we'd show it all to you. In 2003, in a world far less complex, with fewer tax types, and entirely little or no fraud, you had 242 people. There was a long dip right through the recession where personnel got to a low in 2009 of 189 people, and you can see we've slowly crawled our way up, and that's the blue bars. So, draw your attention to the 242 to the 231 today. The only thing I'll point to, and then I'll sort of readdress your productivity question, is the red line is where refunds have gone in that same window. So the same people are paying out more and more and more. And I just think it's an interesting, kind of cross-section of what's going on. My sense is that we're going to need everybody we have as all the numbers are growing. Sad to say. I'd rather say they were, but it is redeployment, and that's our plan, is to move people that were doing hard paper processing into more analytical jobs, and that's the challenge.
And just to be clear, my question wasn't geared towards, the elimination of FTEs. It was more towards one of my pet peeves, which is fraud, waste, and abuse. If we're able to take those extremely skilled and experienced workers and just shift them either vertically or up and down, as you stated, that would be something that I would see as a positive. So thank you very much.
No problem. Anything else you want to add on this slide, Nina?
No, I think it just shows you the organizational change over a period of time, Mike. And the reason we went back to 2003 was that it was the latest data we could get. But I've heard that the staffing levels were even higher previously. And this is layered upon, which you'll see in a minute, not only increasing refunds, but increasing revenue. And to answer Representative McKiernan's question, we have kept up with the pace, and the revenues have gone up
materially, I think. And we can talk, if we have time at the end, Rep. McKiernan, we can talk about what revenue initiatives actually we have built into both our 2017 budget and 2018 budget. And I'll come back to that. So just sort of in conclusion on the tax section, on the personal income tax and refund discussion. Rep. Serpa, I know there's been a lot of data, but we wanted to give it all to you so you could process it on your own and think about it. We think we've captured the lessons learned from a tough 2016 year, but we also think it was a good year. We got to where we needed to get to. It took a little longer than we thought. We're proud of our new technology. We don't think there's anything to be ashamed of. I think this is a good one. And by the way, $25 million on time, on budget, a little different than I think some of the other things you're seeing out there. Driving productivity and speed is our big challenge here for 2017, and quickly getting the online portal built and up and running by May. And that's kind of the next phase of this. We don't want to rush because we want to make sure everything's wired down first. Staffing requirements and organizational caliber and change, we're on it, and our union partners are with us on it. Our big challenge is preventing a 2017 backlog, and we put the processes in place. We think we'll do that, and we have the sort of the second order steps like a second shift and whatnot we think to act on the moment we get anxious about it. Customer service is a big thing for us. We're trying to improve the way we approach the customer. There are a lot of them, but we think we can do better with better scripts and better attitude. And last, we are trying to provide more transparency through website posting and other things, both directions. The revenue content that we talked about, should we have at the end, would be things like we've just introduced a retail internet reseller bill. Nina and I came up with that ourselves. We weren't the first to do it. Rep. Kennedy last year surfaced it. But here's the deal. With Amazon leading the way, they made a huge commitment to the state, and we're very appreciative of what they've done to just start collecting the 7% sales tax. At $85 billion in revenue, they need to do their part to support Rhode Island when they're shipping goods into our state and they have no physical location here. We've introduced technology and are proposing technology we think could have a really sizable revenue yield for the state and also protect the jobs in Main Street for folks that are paying the 7% or collecting it and paying it, whereas these big internet retailers aren't. And gone is the day where the internet retailer are the fledgling infants and Main Street are the old and tough players. The opposite has happened. So we've done that. We've got a bunch of other revenue initiatives on our books, and we're on those. So let me hand it back over to Nina on page 18 to talk just a little. If you still want us to talk about retail sales permits, Rep. Serpa, the time is yours. So.
Well, the reason why I brought this question up, and it's certainly anecdotal, but it got me to thinking. I received a phone call from a young lady who was new to the pet grooming business. And while it may seem trite, as I said, it got the gears turning. She bought a business, a pet grooming business, about a year ago. At the end of June, she realized that her retail sales permit had expired at the end of June. She called me and she said that on July 1st, she went online, paid her $10 for her renewal, to renew her retail sales license on July 1st. End of July, end of August, September, nothing. Young lady, afraid of the Division of Taxation coming in and shutting her down. So I said, well, is this an unusual situation? She said, I don't think it is. She said, because I went to a trade show with a group of other groomers, and she said, I was expressing my concern and my frustration at not being able to renew my sales permit. She said, calling the office, not getting through to anybody, finally leaving a voicemail with someone. The person never called her back. The other pet groomers said to her, get used to it. This happens every single year. Get used to it. I frankly didn't like that answer. So I thought that was really a poor way of doing business. So she said, I waited August, September, October, November, December. And she's young. She said, I'm really afraid of being closed down.
Did she call?
I called. I had our Office of Constituent Services call, and a very nice lady, I won't even mention her name because you probably know who she is, and I mean it in a complimentary fashion. She called this groomer owner, and she was very nice and totally apologetic, and she said, the computer indicates that the retail sales permit renewal, the new permit was mailed out to you. I forget which month, August or September. The computer indicated that. So the young girl called me, and she got the permit a few days later. But it bothered me that she said that riding to New Jersey to this trade show with these other pet groomers, they all said to her, "Oh no, get used to it. It happens to us every year." I just wondered if you could speak to that.
I am, and we've prepared a number of slides. I apologize. That's unacceptable. It should not happen. We have contact information on this slide deck for you to contact our contact information regarding retail sales permits. I will tell you we converted over our sales tax. We looked at our backlog. We looked very quickly at at the world in which our registration team works, and I'm prepared to show you the context of retail sales permits where we are. We have, so if you'll allow me to go through those slides, but that's not acceptable, and that has to change, and we will change it. So,
I would appreciate that. So, I mean, I'm thinking of other types of salons, and this young lady, besides grooming products, she told me that she sells animal collars. And so the other day when I was in another place, frankly, having my hair done, I looked at the jewelry she had hanging in the products, and I just didn't get a chance to ask that owner if that's been her experience too. And again, I go back to my having been formerly the chairwoman of small business. I mean, these are small businesses. So if those are their frustrations, those are real frustrations. And while we're quick to collect their taxes and to shut them down if there's a delay in their payroll taxes or remitting their sales taxes, we're quick to shut them down. But when they need their new permits, we should be quicker in getting them to them. So for this group to say, "Oh no, it happens every year," get used to it.
We're going to change that. So
I hope so.
Okay. So on,
yes, you wanted a question.
Okay.
Question and a comment. On page 12, where you had the pie chart that indicated the number of calls, walk-in assistants, and emails, were you counting the calls once, or did it include multiple calls on the same?
Those were the actual calls answered, so we don't keep track of who the caller is, but those are calls answered and taxpayer assisted.
Right, so if somebody had a question on their return and they called 5 times, all 5 would be included. It'd probably be useful to see how many one-time calls there were, because maybe there's only 20,000 of those, which means that there's only 20,000 dissatisfied or frustrated taxpayers. So that's just a comment. And unfortunately, I had the same exact experience that Chairwoman Serpa had with a constituent that was unable to get their retail sales permit for about 8 months. So I'll just let you know that happened to me too.
Just for clarification, I was just going to point to, it doesn't mean that they're dissatisfied. They may just have a question. I just want to point, in other words, those weren't 40-something thousand disgruntled.
Oh, good point.
They were 40,000 calls, period. So, yeah. Well, I don't know about half.
We help taxpayers. We do. There are a number of taxpayers that come to us that need help with their understanding their obligation. So that is just one unit of the Division of Taxation. That's not our collection section. That's not any of the other section. The focus of this was just personal income tax. So that is just our 20-plus 23 or so employees in personal income tax.
But again, as I said at the beginning of the hearing, I wanted to share with you, the frustrations we hear from our constituents. And while this young lady doesn't happen to be my constituent, she knows of my work on UHIP. So I guess I'm the fix-it lady. So she called me. She found my number in the phone book, and I believe she's actually her grooming salon is in Rep. Tansey's district. So, but she called me because I'm the fix-it lady, and it concerned me.
It concerns me too. So I would also encourage each of you, if you hear those types of things, to reach out to me immediately. I want, as much as you do, to see things improve.
And our constituent services did get through to someone in your office, for which I'm eternally grateful. And as I said, she said the woman that called me back was wonderful. She was very polite. She was apologetic. But to wait from July 1st to December to get a $10 sales permit, I mean, really.
So just quickly on retail sales tax permits, we looked at the process because you asked. The business application registration process form is a multi-purpose form. It's to register for sales tax collection from everything from vacation rentals to hotels to meals and beverage to sales, cigarettes, all sorts of things. We use that form so we can track the revenue for revenue estimating purposes, and it is being folded into our new system. Our current application queue stands at 113. 44% were received between yesterday and today. We're creating a dedicated retail sales permit icon to the website and to streamline the process. Just to give you some context, the bars show the last 3 years of new sales permits, permit renewals, and the totals. So the total population, as with everything else, is increasing year over year. So far this year, we've received a total of 3,743 new and renewal applications. And the renewal process, just in case you're wondering, is online and coupon. So online filers get a mailing and they submit it, and it's a coupon that gets scanned. It's not labor intensive. We don't anticipate any delays with regard to the renewal process. Same thing with the paper filers. They file an application, they get a coupon book. At the end of the period, there's a renewal coupon, and that too is scannable and will go through our system. So we don't anticipate any problems. That process is being tested, and it has been tested, and it will be effective this year.
I just think the big message on here is that we handle over 30,000 of these a year. So, and right now the queue, we've gotten the queue down to almost nothing, right? So
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you got to what? 30,000 in the queue, and what
right.
was
We did 32,000 last year, 30,000 the year before. So we're processing a ton of these. Nobody likes the delays, and is looking into it. But the good news is the queue's down to almost nil, right? So at this point, once I think she was able to shift attention and energy to it, and again, they processed 32,000, so we got them done. To the extent it was too slow, and it sounds like for some there were, that's under review, and she's on it. So we do get through this queue, and these they don't go unattended. That much is clear.
Can I just make a suggestion, and the thought just flashed into my head? Why couldn't, like, a sales permit like that be renewed, like our driver's licenses, for 3 years or 4 years? So rather than, this young lady, for instance, having to do this every year, going online, putting $10 on her Visa card or whatever, why couldn't she do it once and let it be good for 3 years? I don't know, it just popped into my head. Is that an unreasonable consideration?
Well, there are a category of people who don't remit their sales tax, and we have a collections process. We have approximately we send out 5,000 to 6,000 letters in February reminding people who haven't paid their sales tax. Now, sales tax is a trust fund tax. The tax is actually collected and held. It's criminal not to remit. It's a criminal a crime to not remit that to the Division of Taxation, as is withholding. So we send out approximately 5,000 to 6,000 notices at the beginning of the year to retail sales permit holders who do not remit their taxes, who are holding trust funds. And they get 3 or 4 letters at the end of that period. We send them a shutdown notice, and in August we'll go down. We'll actually, after sending 4 or 5 notices, start going out with the local police to shut down these businesses. So I think the rationale for having a 1-year renewal permit is when you look at approximately 5,000 to 6,000 who are not complying with remitting that, there has to be a mechanism for pulling their permit. If they have it for 3 years, that could encourage revenue loss and violation of statutes.
But you could still shut them down. I mean, I know what happened to another family pub in my district. I mean, your office wanted his payroll. He was behind on his payroll taxes, and he said, I can get there on Monday. And it was too late for your office, and I think he had a conversation with your office on Wednesday or Thursday because he wanted to know if I could stop the shutdown. And he was shut down on Friday, before the start of business on Friday. So It happened like that.
We will look at it. We'll have our legal team and our look at it, and I welcome all ideas to make things better. So,
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question with regards to these 5 or 6 letters that you would send out to these business owners. Why would you need to send out 5 or 6 letters or more?
Because we understand that businesses have tough times. We don't, and we want to give them ample notice to solve the problem, and we want to make them aware of it. I think, we know the challenges that small businesses face, and I think, and plus, if we're going to take the extreme measure of shutting down a business, we want to give the business notice and time to cure the issue.
So if you're a business person and business owner, obviously you're somewhat or are responsible for that particular business, and you are responsible for all of the necessary obligations to the state. So you need to be in compliance. So I have little patience with the state, and I do understand that there's a lot of things going on throughout your business day and so forth. So to send out 5 or 6 notices, I think is a bit much.
I don't know if it's 5. I think it's more like 3. But at the end of the process, before we shut them down, they are contacted by the division at least 5 times, whether that's a phone call and 3 letters, or 2 phone calls and a letter, 3 letters. But there is a series of notices that goes out. Okay, right.
You need to be responsible and accountable for your actions. I think, how much time in between the first communication do you give the individual?
At least 30 days to come in, and then we send them another notice.
And then that's another 30 days?
Yes.
And then another 30 days?
I can go over the process with you. I'll give you more detailed. I don't want to guess right now what the timing is. I don't remember. Okay.
I would appreciate that.
Okay.
If it's too long,
yeah.
You know you put your responsibilities on, you need to step up to the plate, and it's their responsibility. If they need more time, they have to contact the office.
So what I will tell you is the initial notice goes out, the numbers go way down after the initial notice, and it's a whittling away process of getting to the last few. So it does result in revenue collection or enhancing collections, and it is a time-tested program that works. I think, as with everything else we do, it's a balancing act, and I'll look at the process and any improvements we can do to reduce the administrative burden and enhance compliance and encourage compliance. We will look at.
It appears as though we have an enabling fault with regards to 30 days or 30 days. So I'm a business owner. I can just I put it to the side for 3 or 4 months.
Sure. So Rep. Williams, we appreciate it because our other job is collecting the $900 million roughly of sales tax for the state of Rhode Island, and it's the second largest stream of income for us behind personal for the entire state of money coming in. So we appreciate it. Anything we can do to enhance it without being too unkind, we're all about. So it's important to us.
Chippendale.
To piggyback off of Rep. Williams' question, I sort of feel the same way she does as far as the responsibility, but I also understand that, perhaps new accounting software was installed at a company and that put them behind and things like that happen. So upon your first interaction with someone who's not in compliance, do you weigh, I suspect you do, but I just need you to clarify, do you weigh mitigating factors such as that, or the bookkeeper passed away and we don't know the password and we need some time and stuff like that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We think there's a level of compassion and empathy that goes into all of our dealings with taxpayers. We know there are hard times, and we know there are your constituents who face hardships, and we want to be sensitive to that.
And I don't need to tell you because I'm sure you know, but retail owners in this particular case, owners of retail establishments may be a little bit hesitant to call because you're the taxman, and I mean, the Beatles even wrote a song about you. So, that's how they view the tax collector.
That was about you, Nina. Wasn't it?
So I apologize for that diversion there. So is there a dialogue that they can have with someone if they have a private question that they maybe don't want to trigger any sort of an alarm, or are they able to?
Absolutely.
They are.
One of my guideposts for the division is that when somebody comes to the Division of Taxation, that's a great thing, and we need to make them feel welcome. And they're there to solve a problem, and we should be helping them solve that problem.
Great.
So it's not, taxpayers we're public servants, we're there to serve. The servant portion of what we do is very important to me. And I've dedicated most of my career to public service. I believe in it. I believe in the state, and that's the message I send to the entire team.
And again, forgive me, I'm just so stuck in the UHIP stuff. If I own a business and I walk into your office because I'm having a problem meeting my tax obligations, I could walk in.
Yes.
Am I correct?
Yes.
How long could I expect to wait to talk to a real live person on average?
It depends on the time of year. So as you know, our busy time is March through June. But if we monitor the queues of walk-ins and we bring people in and it's the same people that are answering the phones at times and helping walk-ins and answering emails. So we're forming an agile workforce that monitors those queues and speeds up that time. So it's hard to give you a number. At our less busy times, it'll hardly any wait. Right now, I walk through the division and I see that there are very few walk-ins right now. Those walk-ins will increase as the season goes on. Filing season starts January 23rd, and after that, you'll see the number of walk-ins increase, and it'll culminate in mid-April through May and June. But all in all, I think we monitor that line. A bigger wait during tax season, less during the summer, fall, early winter.
Well, could you give me an average of the longer wait? Half hour? An hour and a half?
I would be guessing, and I don't want to do that. I haven't measured that. We haven't measured that metric, and to put a number out there, I don't feel comfortable. But what I can tell you is we can start measuring that, and we will, and we should. So.
And another business owner of mine, this isn't the dog grooming, another business owner of mine, he's been in business for quite a while, and he said that a number of years, probably before both of your times, he indicated that there was actually a tax person assigned to him so that he could, and I think he said the practice stopped around 2011, 2012, and he said he could call Chris, and Chris knew his business, could look up his data, could look up his information. So if this friend of mine who owns this particular business had a question or a problem, Chris could bring it right up on whatever computer system existed then and said, oh yeah, all you need is to do this, this, and this. So, and he said that practice of assigning a tax person to the businesses seems to have stopped. Is that before your time?
I'll have Mike Knoll come up.
I'm just curious because he said it worked great, and friends of his in the same, and it was the hospitality, the restaurant business. Right. So if that helps, he said it worked great. I could call this fellow up, and and they had not a personal relationship, but they had a business relationship. This guy Chris knew the business intimately. Oh yeah, I can look this up, and he said it stopped.
Yes, I'll be happy to address that. My name is Michael Knoll. I'm Chief of Examinations. I've been with the Tax Division for a long time.
Mike, you've got to be specific.
A long time. And
how many minutes?
Many. We did assign cases to our revenue officers in our collections area just that way. And they had an assigned caseload. The trouble with that process was we would have all these projects going on, liquor license renewals, letters of good standing, sales tax permit renewals. There were all these projects that kept coming due at different phases of the year. And assigning people to a specific caseload, there wasn't somebody available for these projects necessarily. So what we tried to do, and we've done this since, I'd say it's about 2011, we would assign so many revenue officers to handle, say, liquor license renewals or letters of good standing, so many to handle our mail correspondence, our email, so many to be on the telephones answering taxpayers' inquiries. And we would rotate these folks through the different job functions, and the work was assigned more by job function than by a specific taxpayer, trying to facilitate everybody. Because we had caseloads, a revenue officer might have 9,000 cases assigned to him or her under that prior regime. And these people, theoretically, were going to call up those accounts and speak to them. You're delinquent, you need to file, you owe a balance. Well, you can't call 9,000 people in a month. So they wound up just responding to the phone calls that came in. And which, if we had unlimited number of people, might be a fine way to do it. But what we tried to do to facilitate all the functions is we assigned a quarter of the staff to walk-ins and telephones and such as that. We would double up and assign more of the staff to liquor license renewals during that season of the year. And then we'd shift those people over, and that would usually end around December. In January, February time, we start getting into the sales tax permit renewal season, and we'd shift more people to that. And we were trying to accommodate all the job functions throughout that collection function. And sometimes it works very well, but sometimes people miss the fact that they could always call and get Johnny every time they called because they had Johnny's number. And now you just call the number and you get the next available revenue officer to help you with your issue.
I guess at the end of the day, all I'm asking is that your office, like every other office, does everything it can to be business friendly. I mean, you've heard the governor, it's jobs in the economy. You've heard the speaker, it's jobs in the economy. But accountability and efficiency go with jobs in the economy. And the small businesses are the backbone of our state. I mean, I don't need to tell you folks that. You see the dollars and cents that they bring in. So I guess I'm just asking you to constantly reassess and do anything you can to be friendly to all businesses. And, and while the lure of new businesses to the state is attractive, and I don't disapprove of that, there are businesses here who complain. And frankly, sometimes I think their complaints are legitimate. One business owner said to me, he said, I feel like we're the stepchildren. And, it's all on the glamour and the glitz and the sexy businesses that are coming in. And we're the stepchildren. What about us? So I guess that's what I'm asking your office to always be cognizant of, is that they are the backbone and they need attention. So please don't brush them aside.
No, the director and I were involved a week ago at Bryant at the Small Business Summit, and we're engaging with them more actively and proactively. I'm going to a small business outreach session in a week or so. So we're out there. We're out there in the community where we know the challenges they face, and we're sensitive to them.
And I've been going to those small business summits every year for the last 10 years. This was the first year that I missed one. And every year I hear it's regulations, regulations, regulations. And I keep saying, the day I read in the Providence Business News that the business community is so happy because some of these regulations that get in the way have been lifted, then I'll cheer. I'll throw a party. But for 10 years I hear regulations, and I just don't see many, if any, of these regulations going away. And does your office cooperate with Director Eric Godwin, about, what makes sense, what made sense in 1998 may not make sense now. So I hope you're constantly reviewing them to get rid of them. do away with them and take care of our stepchildren, frankly. That's my lecture for tonight. Any other questions from the panel members? Members of my committee? Rep. Tansey.
Any suggestions for the UHIP group? I mean, you used your STAR. STAR was what you adopted for your software, and there were no consultants, right? It was just the corporation that, I mean, did you use Deloitte? What were?
Revenue Solutions Incorporated, a company out of Massachusetts. And it was a partnership, and they have been very responsive and very good. I am reluctant to give any suggestions to UHIP because I don't know the UHIP context. I will tell you I'm very sensitive to the narrative that taxation is being lumped in with other dissimilar projects. We are different. We have a different story to tell, and I think ours is, and I'm not saying, and I don't want to lay any cast any aspersions on that team because I know they're working very hard. But we are different, and we have had success. We're on time. We're on budget. Revenues are up. We don't have nearly the number of people we had in 2003, and these folks have worked tremendously hard to get where we are. Without them, we would not be where we are. And it's not me or Mike or Rob that does the work. It's the rank and file who get in the weeds, who process these returns, who do these sales tax permits, and they deserve all the credit. So I cannot talk about UHIP, and we are different. And I hope that you take that away from. We worked really hard on this presentation to give you as much data as possible, and unprecedented data in the tax context. No other state is providing this level of transparency publicly. So we know we have to do it. We're public servants, and we'll continue to do it. But we are different.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate the amount of work that's gone into the way that you've transformed the division of taxation, and it did start with your predecessors, and it was a multi-year process, and the General Assembly supported that move, and it's nice to know that the different programs are now able to communicate with each other, and that there's there's just that much more efficiency created by it. So I definitely do understand and acknowledge the hard work that's been put in by the employees. Thank you.
And I can appreciate Rep. Tansey's question, because those of us that serve on finance and oversight or both, it has literally given us nightmares. I mean, I lie awake at night, and I respect the fact that you respect the fact that it's, and I call them your frontline boots on the ground, and good management makes for good workers, and I appreciate that you give them the credit. But then on the complete reverse side, the people who work at these DHS offices, their frustration is by the time a person gets to them, they get all the blame for being saddled with a system that doesn't meet their needs. They can't respond. They can't do their job. And, of course, if you've been waiting in line for 2.5 hours, the person with whom you come face to face, that person's going to get it. And, I mean, I've had personal stories told to me of who's losing their hair. They've had to take time out of work, literally losing their hair, having to go out on sick leave, on stress leave, can't eat, losing weight. One lady from a daycare center called me. She had an appointment, and this isn't your problem, but she had an appointment at DHS with a gentleman. She arrives for the appointment, and 20 minutes before, she was told he was just rushed to the hospital with chest pains. So this is why that is so troubling to us. And I just don't want this to be a free fall of late tax returns. So I don't want this meeting to be critical. I'm trying to be proactive. I just don't want to have another disaster on our hands, because we are all feeling this disaster. We don't want any of you, the administrators and or the state workers, literally losing your hair, being taken to the hospital with chest pains. And one woman said, my husband is ready to leave me. because all I do is come home and complain about my job. That's an awful way to go to work every day. And not to say the small businesses that are out there are suffering. You've read the stories, nursing homes being owed $1.5 million for a year, and then I could just go on and on. So I'm just asking you to please do everything you humanly and possibly and computer-wise can to give the money back to our citizens who have it coming to them, and let's try not to have delays this year. And I will have you back. I'm going to ask you for an update maybe sometime in March. Is that fair? March, beginning of April?
I think you might want to wait till the tax season. The tax season starts mid-April.
Get past April 15th, then
Yeah,
all right.
I think you want to wait till midsummer and then say, where are we? And where
Okay.
versus last year.
Okay.
And I think you'll have a pretty good story.
And I'll be honest, I don't want to read in the media again that, well, July didn't happen, well, now October, and here I am still getting calls in December. I will be very upfront with you. I really don't want to hear that again this year. So
we appreciate that, Chairwoman, and we've shown you the steps we were taking and have taken, and I think we're on the best trajectory we can do. I can't control the media. They're going to say what they're going to say. I can't necessarily respond. We will respond to every single taxpayer and every single complaint. I can't tell the media what I'm doing on that, nor can Nina, but rest assured, no one goes unanswered. That's a fact.
I appreciate that. And I don't think anybody here, when we make a call on behalf of our constituent, we don't need to know the details. But if we can just be informed that the situation is being resolved or we have someone looking at it, we've gotten back to your constituent. I think that's all we need to know. We don't want you to violate the HIPAA laws of taxation, believe me. We just want to know that our constituents are happy and satisfied, because when they call us, they are unhappy and very much dissatisfied. So I feel like a DHS worker sometime. I'm holding the phone out here while, they give me the dickens when it's not my fault, and I'm sure everyone's seated here. And if you haven't yet, you will. So I'm warning the freshmen, you will. But we're all here for public service. We're all here for our constituents. We get elected to serve them. You get paid to serve them. So let's fix this and let's do it right and let's do it together. That's all I ask.
We will. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, Brett Williams?
I would like to thank you very much for the great work that you have done. You brought us up to the 21st century, and I look forward to you doing even better when we come back and see each other again.
Thank you.
We'll be back.
Thank you.
You will be back, I assure you.